So we are back in Canterbury. It is still the end of February, 1455. Guy de Free has been recovered, although almost half dead, and apparently having maimed himself to escape the dungeon of his captors. But unfortunately not before he was interrogated and gave up dangerous knowledge about his Domitor and his companions. Eleanor herself survived an ambush by the same kidnappers, surviving only at the cost of the 5 guards, whom have all succumbed to their wounds or disease. And according to Gertrude, all of the belongings in your covered carriage, as well as the carriage itself, have been seized by church authorities. Canterbury proves itself dangerous to the Gauntlet, which now seeks to flee it. The Slavic artist, Mina, has agreed to help the two of you in your plan to escape, which involves a well-timed diversion set to occur at the crossroads in the heart of the city when you are ready. And so it is a new night tonight. You can take off a blood point as you rise for the evening. And I'll begin with a question for the two of you. Now that your belongings are in question, Elenid, were Hezekiah's notes with you or Cormac?
I assumed they were with Cormac. Cormac was the one it was initially given to.
Okay, I'll take that. And Robert, where did you leave your book?
Probably would have left it at his manor when he last went there.
Alright, fair enough. So the two of you rise, and now you have taken haven under Octavia's hospital at St. Thomas. As you rise, I will give the scene to you.
Are we all in the same room, Guy included?
Yes, everyone's together. It's a little bit cozy in here, but it's the safest you've been able to find is this room in St. Thomas's hospital, under the protection of Octavia.
Robert will start by checking on Guy.
He tosses and turns a bit. He seems to be sleeping, although perhaps not very soundly.
He'll give him another point of blood just to hopefully speed along his recovery.
Alright. Tasting the V-take. Go ahead.
Sorry, you can finish.
So tasting the Vitae, he's quick to wake into that, and seems very capable of feeding from your wrist. And he seems to perk up a bit after this, although you suspect it may be some time before he's fully recovered. Go ahead, Elenid.
Elenid, after waking, will look around for Gertrude. Gertrude's still there, correct?
Yeah, she is. There's a small table and chair, and she seems to have sat and propped herself up with one hand kind of resting against her head, and she occasionally slips in and out of consciousness. You can tell she's quite tired as well.
If you need to rest, you should rest, but first, will he be good enough to travel?
Can you speak, Guy?
He pushes himself up at some pain, and propping himself up in bed. I can speak. I don't know how well I can walk. Kind of looks down at his feet.
How about ride?
He seems to wince at the thought.
Alternatively, we could procure another carriage.
Oh, begging your pardon, my lord, but she may be right. If you wish to quit the city sooner rather than later, if you don't want to wait on me, you may need another carriage.
Perhaps so.
Getting out of here sooner is preferable.
The streets are most dangerous. Did you have a plan?
Yes, I have put a considerable amount of thought into it. Namely into exactly where the distraction must take place for us to vacate. And should everything go to plan, then we will be fine. But that is an if.
Did you learn of anything about Patrick McNally? Guy.
He looks to you, and his eyes widen. I learned these Inquisitors are serious about protecting him. It didn't take long for them to find me after I started asking around.
How long were you in town?
Just a couple days. Got around to the Perot Tavern, and I didn't get much farther than that. This McNally's got some powerful friends.
You said everything. Was that only to the questions they asked, or did you volunteer information?
He smirks as he looks to you. I didn't volunteer anything I didn't have to.
Good man. What do they know?
Well, they know as well as I do that you and your companions aren't exactly fond of day trips. That I've never exactly seen you finish a meal. Except you. And he turns to Ellen. You seem to handle that dried meat I gave you when we first met.
Indeed, I did.
Suffice to say, they know enough that they seem pretty interested in not letting you go too far, I think. These church types. I gotta think they got a pyre with your name on it. He looks between the two of you.
That doesn't surprise me. As
No.
I have said before, bad luck does seem to find us.
It was something else, you should know. I've been in my fair share of fights and brawls. Hell, I've even been questioned a time or two before this. But one of these men, I don't know. he had something else. It wasn't like, he kind of looks around as though searching for the words. It was unnatural. Not like what I've seen you folks do. But, well, it was like he could compel me.
One of the Inquisitors.
He nods. There was something about him, righteous, and I felt like I was guilty. I felt like I had to say things to him. He was bathed in so much light. Just shakes his head a bit. Never seen any church man like him. I imagine he gives a hell of a sermon if he wants to. All that to say, if you go up against him, he might have more than Bibles to throw at you.
Certainly keep that in mind. You've mentioned our descriptions. Have you mentioned any locations? Lincoln, for example.
He nods. I mentioned a lot of the places we stopped along the ways. Places we spent more time than others, but they didn't seem very interested in that.
Do you remember which places specifically? The ones they took interest in.
Well, they seem most interested in time spent in York and Lincoln, but mostly here. I don't know how extensive their operation is, but I also got the impression they didn't exactly have this entire cathedral backing them.
Is that so? That is important information.
He shrugs and then kind of winces at the movement. Hard to say. The people I saw... He just kind of shakes his head. They didn't talk or act the way you'd expect if they had the run of the place, if you know what I mean.
Yes. They did not act with authority.
Unfortunately, I don't really know enough about clergy law to say what they can and cannot do. Although by any God-given right, they shouldn't have been able to do anything that they were in there. I wasn't the first one. And his eyes start to tear up as they widen and look off in thought. There were others before me.
I see. Get some rest, guy. We'll see about getting a carriage out of here.
He looks to you and his eyes are still wide and they have the sheen of tears forming, but he nods a couple times and leans back.
Elened will head out of the room.
Robert will stick close by. Alan, that is.
Alright. Once they get out of the room and the door closes, she will speak in a more hushed tone. You know what we have to do, right? We have to bring this to the attention of Octavia because of the security risk it presents to 2 of the Covenant cities. Technically 3 if you count here.
You are correct.
Not to mention that we ourselves are... well, they're looking for us. And given the nature of things, we should likely do this sooner rather than later. Princes do have a way of finding out things without us saying anything if we wait too long.
First stop, Octavia, then.
Yes.
Barbara will begin heading towards the tower where she stays.
And Helena will follow close behind and say, he is your ghoul. As such, I believe you should be the one to speak on his behalf.
That I will.
The two of you make your way through St. Thomas Hospital, and having been there and starting to have gotten a better internal map of this area, you're able to wind your way and find the tower that seems to hold the mad and the hysterics. And you enter and see that you don't find Octavia, but you do see coming down the spiral staircase that you went up before to get Guy, you do see Sister June walking down. Ah, good evening. I hope you fare better.
Somewhat. Good evening.
Yes, indeed we do.
Her hands kind of come together as she finishes walking down the spiral staircase. What can I do for you this evening? Are you in need of more blankets? It is quite cold.
An audience with Prince Octavia.
She looks between the two of you. So soon? Were you not already
Yes.
speaking with her so recently?
But there is some information that has recently come to light that she should be aware of.
Well, she is not wont to be too often bothered. I shall go and fetch her. See if she is able to meet you.
My apologies, we would not be doing this if it was not important.
Quite.
She seems to linger a few more moments, smiling awkwardly before she begins back up the spiral staircase, wrapping around the tower. You can see her for most of this as she walks all the way around it, and then disappears to higher levels. It's around 15 minutes later that finally you hear the sound of steps on stone. Throughout this time, you can intermittently hear the cries and the wails above you as you have in the past. They seem not to be missing anyone, or perhaps they've replaced their beds quickly. In time, you see the small figure of Octavia descending the staircase. Sister June is still with her. She watches the two of you as she makes her way to the center and stands in front of this stone statue of the angel. Was there more trouble?
Yes. The Inquisitors have gotten a hold of my goal. He was able to escape, but he was compelled to reveal information that could be dangerous to the Covenant. Mainly the cities we spent the most time in.
She stares at you for a long time, remaining stoic. Her eyes go to Elenid next. Inquisitors. The same which we feared.
Yes, and according to his school, they do not have the backing of the church in which they reside.
Not the full backing.
And those cities that he gave information for were, well, the only ones that the ghoul thinks that they had interest in were, well, here, York, and Lincoln.
I have long observed these hunters. I do not suspect their resources are great. I shall relay these revelations to the other princes.
Are you certain their resources are as little as you think?
There is little that escapes my attention in this city.
Why would they be protecting Patrick McNally?
A hornet's nest is only dangerous when struck.
This is true.
Though those hornets, thanks to the information gained, now know what the members of the Gauntlet look like and are on the lookout for.
Does your ghoul know of your title and your responsibility, Lord DeVere?
Not mentioned much to him about that.
Her eyes turn back to Elenid. You must remember, These kind, even among the hunters, their knowledge comes from folktale and rumor. On those occasions which they chance upon a servant, and she gestures over to Robert, even the greatest puzzle piece may mean nothing in a vacuum of ignorance. Engaging or seeking conflict with this cell may be more costly than avoidance.
I assume if they start to gather, be more active, that would be more of a threat.
In less than half a century, half or more of these hunters shall die. We need only outlast them.
Very well. I suppose there's little more to say.
If you desire to quit this city with their surveillance and knowledge, I will aid you in this, Robert de Vere.
My thanks, that is our intent at this moment. I will graciously accept your offer.
Before you go, remind me your purpose in seeking the McNally.
Patrick McNally. Out of character, I'm trying to recall exactly his relationship with my grandsire.
From what you were able to find out, Patrick McNally was a velvet merchant whom was approached by a Mercer contact, and then the Mercers lost some negotiator or envoy. And from what you put together, Patrick fled after that, and his home and his warehouse burned down shortly after. This was learned through what you got from Gaetan, as well as your own investigation on the ground in York, in the port of Hull.
So the Mercer contract is the one that vanished?
Yes. You understand that perhaps there was some trade or business that was going to happen between them before this Mercer disappeared after going to meet with Patrick McNally.
Well, he'll explain to Octavia. He won't leave much out at all.
And on that note, this McNally seems to be under the protection of these hunters, as you call them.
Perhaps against this Mercer group.
Perhaps so.
I think perhaps you would be safest in leaving your investigation of this Mercer and this McNally. Unless you believe this related to the safety of the Covenant. I have not heard cause to continue this.
Out of character once again. Robert's grandsire regretted not informing the council. Was that just of the involvement of Patrick McNally, or what was that exactly?
Your grandsire and Gaetan had involvement in this because you learned somewhat recently of their ownership and control of the merchants of the staple, and it was through Gaetan's contacts trying to expand the business of the merchants of the staple that they learned of the Mercers reaching this velvet merchant first. Your grandsire did not wish for this to get very closely scrutinized because he feared the trail of questions and investigation would reveal his ownership of the merchants of the staple, especially after Gaetan's death. It painted a very incriminating picture.
This merchant trading in velvet. Velvet was one of the things found at the estate of the last Gauntlet, correct?
No, I think you're thinking of the chest that was found that was perhaps going to be brought to the merchant. Gaetan had a sample of his own wares, which it was thought he might be bringing out, or perhaps was going to give to your grandsire to give out.
That's what I had in mind. Okay.
So in summary, Gaetan and Jean-Marc seems like they were going to do business with this McNally before all of this came about.
Still at the problem of nothing incriminating with a merciful mercer company, though.
I'll have you make a intelligence. Do you have enigmas?
Nope.
Do you have investigation?
Yes.
Give me an intelligence investigation, standard difficulty. Putting some of these pieces together out of character.
And that's a fail.
I don't see a roll.
You don't?
I don't. Oh.
As my ST dice. Oh, there it is.
I lost connection to roll 20. That's why.
Oh, that's why. Never mind, that roll didn't happen. No, it totally was a fail.
Sorry, I'm just resetting everything. Roll 20 can be difficult. It's unclear to you what the significance is of the Mercer Company and how it relates to Jean-Marc and Gaetan and the McNallys. It's not all a clear picture to you yet. Are you discussing this kind of aloud with Octavia and Elenid? Or is this more of an internal thought process?
At this point, he'll mention it out loud because he's lost.
Then you can make the same roll, Elenid. You may be able to piece some of this together.
Into investigation, right?
That's correct. Some of this draws on notes and sessions that are many moons behind us, so we can do a brief out-of-character summary. Alright, you succeed. So, as Robert's discussing some of this, it occurs to you that the Mercers brought in a high-ranking negotiator to finalize some deal with this McNally on the second trip. And this is who went missing. Based on what you heard from his ghoul, this group, these hunters, have taken other people in the past. It's possible that maybe Jean-Marc regretted his decision to not bring this up because this high-ranking Mercer negotiator was someone of significance to whoever was behind them. That perhaps these hunters interrogated someone of significance in the Mercers that might have unveiled more.
For the ease of time, I'll just say she shares what she comes up with.
So now you know that, Robert. Octavia is listening intently, quietly. Sister June seems a bit nervous, but she's remaining standing there.
If only we could question inquisitors.
You believe strongly these Mercers are a great threat.
With the resources they have, yes.
I will admit to not being a merchant or knowledgeable of the merchant business in England. I cannot speak to such things. However, if this is indeed some threat to the Covenant, you may wish to convene with the remainder of the Gauntlet. The Covenant faces strife and conflict from within. Though I am given strong sensation these Mercers pose an unrealized threat beneath the surface.
If I may.
She turns to you.
The previous Gauntlet thought them to be a threat as well. It is what they were discussing before the building they were in caught fire.
She does not acknowledge anything or give any socially appropriate cues of knowing what you're saying. The Gauntlet must determine which threat more immediately endangers England.
would eat so.
Should you return to Canterbury with the Gauntlet as a whole and a plan for this McNally, I would hear such a plan. I am convinced these Mercers bear caution, if not investigation. But I will not endanger my city needlessly.
Of course. When we do come up with options, you will be informed.
I shall arrange for your transportation tomorrow evening at dusk.
Thank you, and I had thought of a diversionary tactic that shouldn't be too taxing.
If you are persecuted as closely as it seems, this may be wise. So long as no harm comes to my city.
So long as the plan goes forward as well as I think it will, then that should not be a problem.
And she abruptly turns to walk away. Sister June smiles awkwardly and nods to each of you as she follows in turn. She's not going very fast, but she seems to have dismissed herself. Leaving the two of you there, at the base of this tower.
Well, they have to inform Mina. Well, Elnet has to inform Mina that the distraction has to happen tomorrow. And inform the ghouls to rest up for the next night.
Alright. And is Robert doing anything else tonight?
No,
Oh.
nothing else.
Elnet also has to be a little sneak and try to get something to eat. Sticking to alleyways and such, trying to be out of sight.
Alright.
Well, if Eleanor will have Robert accompany her, that's what he'll do. For that.
Alright, Alanid, for stalking the city alleys and back streets, I will have you make a Wits Stealth, difficulty 7.
I'm going to be applying my obtenebration to this.
All right. So I believe you can... What do we decide? You can add your dots and obtenebration to stealth rolls for this?
Yes. What was the difficulty again?
7. Five successes. You're very capable of finding a multitude of people to feed on. It's slow going, and that sometimes you have to be a bit more cautious. This is a well-patrolled city, even in winter and even at night. And the weight of this city's aura upon you is what's most distracting. But you're actually very successful in spite of all of this.
Okay. From 3 of them and 1 from the 4th one.
That's fine.
And I'm topped off.
Okay. And with that, the night will be ending as the two of you go hunting and prepare for departure the next evening.
And if he needs to feed, there's a 5th person I didn't even touch.
Just stalking people in the alleyway for fun.
Yes.
Alright, so that scene fades as we transition across England. Meanwhile, the Isle of Man. Having some audio issues. Meanwhile, in the Isle of Man, we catch up with Cormac and Thomas, a couple weeks ahead in time. You've landed at the island with the Peter von Danzig. After a brief skirmish with half of the Marines aboard, the ship was captured and is now crewed by your 10 newly forsworn pirates, along with 10 of the Dublin brawlers and 40 sailors. The captain executed by none other than the anarchist, Helen Alice, citing too great a threat in sparing his life. So you're leaving Gautier and the crew behind to clean up the ship as you depart down the gangplank, following Helen and her 2 companions into the port town, where she leads you through the streets to a warehouse. The warehouse is quite large, and in good proximity to the docks. Inside it is largely empty, but for the scaffolding that could support many barrels and boxes of cargo, many crates. 2 mercenary types that were accompanying her continue on, and they go further into the warehouse, down one of these aisles, and they disappear out of view. So as the 2 of you make your way in, these 2 other men make their way somewhere else. Ellen sets a lantern down on one of the crates, creating a small area of light, and turns to you as you're just now entering, the door opening behind you, following her in.
Cormac will stop a short distance away and cross his arms, clearly waiting for her to say something first.
And Thomas?
So she's just walked in and stopped.
She brought a lantern onto the crate and is waiting for the two of you. It looks like Cormac has stepped up to join her.
Well, obviously Thomas is going to approach.
Let us get to the matter at hand. We spoke once, previously, of making the eldest pay for their crimes against the young and their abuse of power, unworthy of their own blood. Now that you have joined us in action, you are committed to this goal. The fall of the Covenant and the rise of our new regime.
Surely the fall of the Covenant is already assured. It fractures from within.
The eldest are canny and wily. They may yet recover from their own missteps. We cannot allow that chance. We must take advantage of their fracture. We intend to replace their tyranny with freedom. No more princes calling blood hunts, or sheriffs hunting innocents, and no more primogene councils divvying up domain, or the feeding grounds. We seek to abolish their hierarchies which predate memory. This is a great task and cannot be left to chance or idling.
Will not a lack of any hierarchy create chaos?
Equality has never been known among our kind. Cainites allowed to do as they please, treating with others fairly, independently and unconstrained by these chains. We have seen what their way has brought us. Millennia out of memory, of subjugation.
And what of the silence of the blood if there's no one left to keep it?
We do not need princes to be sensible about the kind. We teach our young of how to stay hidden. But that does not require us to bind them under our rule. And her eyes go off to the side, and following her gaze, you can see that her companions have returned, coming into view of the light, escorting a couple of men who are making a bit of noise. You get the impression they're a bit tipsy. One, by their outfit, looks like a sailor or fisherman of some kind, and the other is hunched from years of bent over some table work of some type. And they're both tossed unceremoniously before you, and they kind of trip over themselves. What's going on? What is all this? Kind of struggling to get up. I imagine you are a bit peckish after your endeavor. These are for you.
Thomas will take hold of the bent fellow, the most likely to be a craftsperson.
And Ellen's eyes fall on you, Cormac.
And Cormac will lean next to the other, and sit down on one knee and take his chin in his hands, turning his head back and forth.
He seems dizzy. He blinks a few times.
My thanks. And his fangs will descend, and he will feed.
It's all just a bad dream. And Tom will feed as well.
You begin feeding, and after the voyage, it is a savory taste. The hot wash of blood reminds you. You are accurate in your assessment, Tom. You taste the blood of a man who has worked his entire life. How much do you each mean to take?
Tom would take 3.
Same.
And so the men pass out on the floor afterwards, breathing a bit heavily, but still breathing. I hope you will forgive the lack of silver goblets and plush chairs. There is neither comfort nor affluence in rebellion, you see.
I've spent long enough working for my mead.
Me as well. I have no use for such finery.
And I am gladdened to see that manor house living has not softened up either of you too much. I can say living in the Blackfriar Priory of my grandsire did me no favors as a neonate. No. Thanks to you, we have a sizable war chest to utilize, and it will see use very soon. The Isle of Man serves well as a base of operations due to its insignificance in the greater political landscape in England, and the proximity to key ports is advantageous. Soon, we mean to send out envoys to the court of Edinburgh to gain their support and that of the border reavers against the Covenant, and your goods will be the payment.
Will we also be doing the delivering?
We may arrange for others to deliver. However, it may be beneficial for one or both of you to ride north to Edinburgh to meet with Prince Malcolm there and secure support from the Scots or the Reavers. Cormac may fare better in negotiation than any of us. Malcolm is not fond of the English.
That's fair to say. There's been conflict enough to go around on both sides of the war.
After we have secured an agreement with them, we shall begin preparation for an incursion into Carlisle, at the heart of Cumbria.
If I may make a suggestion, I would prioritize ports where the Worshipful Company of Mercers plies their trade. They are supplying every side of any conflict, profiting from making the Covenant princes wealthy and inspiring their disunity.
The words we have heard most recently is that Ragna and Barbaros are on the brink of war. If these mercers seek to fund it, all the better for them to tear each other apart. We do not yet have the strength to attack a capital city. However, Carlisle is a Covenant city. It is led by Broga Ironbend, once prince, now viceroy. If we spread news of his destruction and the fall of Carlisle, then neonates across England will see what Covenant protection provides. Our numbers will swell, and then we will have the strength to strike at the Council itself.
Many of the neonates are already on edge. We've had several discussions with them.
There are ears willing to hear in both Lincoln and London.
She nods. I am aware. As for the two of you, at least one of you must retain your status as a Gauntlet Lord, preferably both. You are far more valuable to this cause as Gauntlet Lords with direct access to the Covenant princes. There is no limit to what we could do with your proximity to them.
You said once before you knew all about me. How much, I wonder?
I know your father died at the hands of hunters. In service to an undeserving prince.
Thomas ruffles a little bit at that. Not quite what I meant. But it's true enough.
Are you speaking about what's between your legs?
Ha! Cormac blurts out. Not meaning to, he puts a hand over his mouth.
Yes, I'm aware. It means little to me. What matters to me is that Thomas Chamberlain is a Gauntlet Lord who has and may yet again meet Covenant princes face to face, hear their words and plans.
Then perhaps Judith Stone could serve the rebellion openly.
Judith Stone is not as useful as Thomas Chamberlain. I'm afraid our sex is not afforded the same advantages as men. I imagine that is what beset your decision early on.
My point being, if a woman fitting her description is seen in your company, carrying out strategic strikes on Covenant-held domains, it would not be as damning against Thomas Chamberlain.
She nods. You may take an identity which you wish. However, opportunities will arise soon where we require a Gauntlet Lord to provide us important information.
You have me regardless.
And both have I as well.
She smirks faintly. What are the current directives of the Council?
Tom gestures at Cormac to give him leave if he so decides to share.
Some of their plans, I think, have been put on hold in light of the argument between Ragnar and Barbaros. But there is some scramble since the death of Prince de Martinique, and the seating of a new prince there. As for their future plans, they haven't yet made us privy to those.
They sought instead to empower us to use whatever means necessary to bring Barbaros and Ragnar to the negotiating table.
And how well that went.
So they will not parley.
Ragnar was nearly convinced, but Barbaros would not hear reason.
She nods, looking down at the lantern in thought.
And now that his ship has been purloined, he'll certainly blame her for it.
We can only hope. Unfortunately, we are not in a position to immediately take advantage of their conflict. But in the coming months and years, we shall be.
It may draw his attention away from more northern precincts.
She nods again, looking to you. There is time yet for these events to unfold. We are not yet free of winter's chill, and it will be many nights before the season favors marching armies.
Then our first step, as you said, is to go to Scotland.
You may always return to this island and this place, though you may not find me here in the future. Trust your messages only to myself, Dufour, or Timbers. You may also relay to the Jester a desire to meet. He has an uncanny forte in these matters.
So it would seem. He arranged our meeting quite deftly, I should say.
Where currently are forces rallied? I'd rather not step on any toes if I can.
Dufour is likely still in Ireland. I know not where Jack is. Abroad somewhere. We have many assets spread across England. He is likely gathering reports from many of them.
The former Chester sheriff, was he among them?
There is strategic advantage in ignorance. I do not know all of Timber's contacts, nor do I wish to, and if I did, I would not share them in a list to you.
I only ask because I've had cause to have contact with him on several occasions. He gave good counsel.
Perhaps if you find Jack Timbers again, you may ask him. I cannot speak to the former Chester sheriff.
And what of the Von Danzig?
The goods will be unloaded here, and when we have reached an agreement with Malcolm, they will be moved. The Von Danzig will be outfitted for war, but it will not be deployed until the timing is right. There may come a time when we need your skills as a ship captain. At that time, I may invite you to take command of the Von Danzig.
I'll welcome the invitation. At least until I've met final death or you found someone better.
My question is, what will you do with your compatriots?
Ellen may yet be swayed. Robert is rather self-serving. He's hell-bent on avenging his grandsire. God knows what else. Personal glory, some such.
I will trust you to deal with them as you need. Your actions speak for themselves. You have earned that, at least.
Part of me fears this was always meant to be. At least concerning myself.
She looks to you, nodding.
I've always run afoul of the princes and their games.
You will find many like-minded company among us.
As a point of particular interest, the Covenant had seen fit at their last meeting to name Elenid as their war master, their field marshal. She could, in theory, rally the Covenant forces and command them.
Her record is known to me. And she would be a great threat if that occurs.
Unless she turned those forces against the Covenant.
that would be calamitous. If she cannot be turned, I hope you understand what must eventually happen then.
I suppose we've always known, haven't we, Thomas?
I've no little measure of respect for the woman, all things considered.
I'd rather she'd be on our side, that's for certain.
Agreed.
Robert as well, despite his... I don't even have a word for what it is. He finds unlimited strength in protecting his own skin.
There are those among our cause who are self-serving. Even they can be shown a righteous purpose.
I see no religion in what we're doing here. Only necessity.
Justice. Should you need it, there's a token I would have you keep. As proof. And she pulls from her neck a small necklace. It's a very simple thing. It looks like mostly twine, and the token is polished stone with, it looks like an ankh, but the way it wears, it's not right side up.
And what does that symbol mean?
It is something we have used. To identify allies.
And we shall have to keep it safe.
She nods as she takes it from her palm and hands it to you.
If ever I feel like we might be searched, I might even store it in my own arsehole.
At the very least, Timbers and Dufour will know it.
He nods and slips it in his pocket.
I wish you good fortune in your negotiations, Lord de Courcy.
What about you, Thomas? Are you going with me to Scotland?
We do need to confer with our compatriots as well. How long before the goods are meant to arrive in Edinburgh?
As I said, there is time. Malcolm will not be expecting goods for some time. Only, perhaps, to expect a diplomat. We sent word ahead that we wish to treat with him. I would not wait beyond the year.
No. But we had arranged to meet with Robert and Elenid in Bristol a week ago.
Then you should keep your meeting. I feel their minds on the subject, to the extent you safely may.
And from thence, yes, I will join you in Edinburgh. Perhaps they will as well.
Let us make plans in haste.
Are there vessels at port here that might take us to Bristol?
There are. She nods. And safe haven here below the warehouse should you need it. It's not a very comfortable existence, but I do not imagine it will bother you much.
Not over much, no. I should also inform you that I had taken liberty to procure a Keep and Bailey castle outside of London. It's in the process of being restored to functional states. Perhaps another year, maybe 2.
You've done what? When were you going to tell us about this?
I told Ellen it on the ride to Lincoln. She gave me quite a few interesting notes on how to improve the structure.
You're as slippery as a damned eel, aren't you?
Tom grins a bit. It might make an effective point from which to rally troops if we ever do need to lay siege to London itself.
That seems a distant dream at best.
Fair, but I'd rather it be incorporated into future plans now than sprung up later on when it's of no good use.
We'll discuss this. Sorry.
We are unlikely to win any excessively length siege against the Covenant forces. But for now, I would have you focus at the task at hand, securing support from Malcolm.
We'll make for Bristol from here. There was an errand that Cormac and Elenid had meant to run in Bath. From thence, we'll make our way to Edinburgh. If the other 2 members of the Gauntlet can't be swayed, we will do so under the guise that we are seeking allies in the forthcoming conflict between York and Chester.
You don't think Elenid will see right through that?
She may. She may choose to believe, rather than question.
It is a worthwhile ploy. Believable, at least. And I shall leave you to it and wish you good fortune.
Too many victories to come.
She smiles faintly and begins backing away into the darkness away from the lanterns, and then departs, leaving the two of you. The two mercenaries follow her into the darkness.
A fortress outside London, bleeding goat tits.
It's only a small keep and bailey castle. It's no fortress. But it's defensible. It's small, and a few men could hold it for a good long while.
And whose name is written under, yourselves or Judith's?
Unfortunately, Judith does not have sufficient coin in her bank accounts to rally the necessary funds to purchase such a thing outright. The Chamberlain household, however,
And if the Covenant should discover your duplicity, where do you think they'll look for you first?
under the name of Thomas Chamberlain, of course.
I don't like it, but I have to trust you. Besides, we have no time to argue. We're already late.
But at least we're fed. It's probably a 3-day boat ride. Nothing for it but to be about it. You gotta go for a stroll on the quay and see if there are any ships leaving by the morning.
It took the words right out of my skull.
Right. So the two of you go in search of...
Tom will lead the way then down to the docks and see what they can find as far as ships leaving.
I was muted again. So the two of you make your way down to the docks. Are you acquiring Gautier first, or...
Oh, yes.
Okay. And then do you offer any explanation to the crew or the Marines or your men, or do you try and disappear into the night before more questions can be asked?
Tom would explain. You'll be outfit for war. Cannons, long nines, proper guns. It may take some time. Enjoy the port while it's available.
Do you tell them you're going to be back at all?
Yeah. 'Cause he expects to be back.
Okay, and who do you leave in charge?
The lieutenant.
Alright. Overall, the men are concerned that after their abrupt betrayal of their country, that the new captain is leaving them, but the two of you had a very impressive turn of events there in assuring them that you'll be back to resume command at some point in the future is just enough to keep them from doing something drastic like abandoning or sailing away with the ship. So they agree. The lieutenant takes command of the ship. And the two of you do find, as Ellen Alice did point out, there is a ship that is willing to ferry out to Bristol. It will leave in the morning, and let's see, just looking at my map. Won't take that long. Probably in about 2 days, they'd arrive in Liverpool, and within the day after that, you'd be in Bristol.
We'll just have to remember not to disembark in Liverpool.
Right. So we'll fade that scene as the two of you make preparations and board this ship, this ferry, meaning to return to Bristol. In Canterbury, the following night has arrived, and the group of you is set to leave. You're informed by someone that a carriage comparable in size to the one you had has been prepared, and even some rations of food has been stocked for it, fresh horses and such. It seems all that's left is for this diversion to take place.
Yep. She will go forward and inform Mina and go over the plan with her, which I have in my notes, and I got 7 successes on.
Did get 7 successes. So you explain the plan to Mina, which on its face is simple enough. Create a diversion in the crossroads area.
Would you like me to make a charisma leadership to see how well it is conveyed?
I don't think that's necessary in this case. With the successes you got, it's elegant in its simplicity, and Mina volunteers that she has a way to create such a distraction without actually causing any harm. She vaguely describes having gifts which tend to induce disorder, but she doesn't expect anyone to be significantly harmed over it. It will draw attention.
Right. And with that in place, she will go forward and start getting what few things they have remaining into the carriage in order for them to set off when the time is right.
Alright. You agree to a certain hour, and the group of you pile into this carriage. The most difficult part is getting Guy to Free, who can walk independently, but he limps, and he's not very strong. He hasn't fully recovered yet. He's still pale and malnourished, you suspect. But he's at least walking independently now. And what is Robert doing during this? Is he going to be right there in the carriage with her?
Yeah. It's going to go along with the plan.
Okay. So you begin to set off just after you can hear a growing calamity somewhere not too far from the stables where your carriage is prepared. When you begin to see that a lot of people are running towards the center of town and some of them running away, you get the impression that whatever Mina's doing has definitely drawn attention. And with that, you motion for the carriage driver to go onward, and your carriage with the four of you is off, with your distraction creating quite a scene behind you. Although it's not clear what's happening, it's certainly distracting. You pass through the gatehouse, and the walls of Canterbury slowly become darker and more distant as you climb hills, heading westward. Which city are you going to first? Or are you going straight to Bristol?
Alaned had intentions on making the way to the port city. The nearest port city in order for them to acquire ships.
Dover would be the closest port city, and that would be very short travel.
And from there, we will see which ships are, in fact, available for charter.
So, Elenid, you don't have any money now, but Robert might. And when you get there, none of the ships are, unfortunately, planning on doing any coastal ferrying. But you do think there are perhaps some captains here on some of the smaller cogs that would be willing to take a job for the right amount of coin. So Robert, if you can roll your resources, difficulty 6, to see if you have enough coin to bribe one of these men. One success. So you scrounge up just enough silver coins that the captain agrees to take on no more than the four of you. You won't take your great carriage, which would take up most of the space on his ship otherwise.
Alaned had no intention on taking the carriage. She will instruct the driver to return to the city and from whence it came.
Okay. And which port are you directing this captain to take you all?
Alaned, at the very least, was intending to go to London.
London.
We have forces we need to muster. I'm certain that our compatriots will find us soon enough.
In London, you say? That is not the meeting spot.
Indeed so, but we have forces we need to muster.
Well, I won't argue against that. Perhaps a message to Bristol, then.
Yes. Though, make sure you phrase it in a very specific way. I have the feeling it could very well be intercepted.
No doubt of that.
Okay. So you charter a ferry round Kent and into the ports of London. It'll take you about a day. When you arrive in London, where do you mean to go? Or what do you mean to do specifically?
She intends for the ghouls to remain in the manor so they don't get sick. And she intends to go speak with the prince on what their verdict is as far as their investigation and trying to keep peace is concerned.
Okay. So you seek audience with the prince. Robert, do you mean to do anything? Sounds like you're having an audience with the prince.
Audience with the prince first. Perhaps seek mercenaries of some sort later.
Okay. And for now, as you're settling in London, we will take our break here since we're close to the hour, and we'll come back in 15 minutes. Sounds good?
No break. Just kidding, that sounds great.
How are we doing?
I am here.
Yo.
Cormac's your...
What? Yeah, I'm here.
Oh,
What?
good. Okay. We will get started. So Cormac and Thomas, you arrive in Bristol after some traveling. And at this point, it is still fairly early in March. Thomas and Elenid on their timeline in mid-February, still mid-travel. I believe you sent a messenger to Bristol, basically explaining that you would not be able to meet them there.
I believe Robert was writing it.
Okay. Then I'll let Robert explain in voice what that message is in detail, which is the message you'll be receiving when you arrive in Bristol.
Put change of plans. Need to meet in London. We'll keep it vague because he suspects someone will read it anyway.
So after you present to the court and Kincaid receives you, he explains that a message was left for you and one of his ghouls hands it to you, so that's the message you get. It's been there for a couple weeks at least. Well, maybe a week. Time math is complicated.
Alright, who exactly was it left for? Both of
The
us?
two of you. Address the two of you.
Well, Cormac's definitely not happy about it.
Hmm.
London? We don't have time to go to London.
It is on the way.
Damn it, what could have happened to delay them?
Who can say? But it does afford an opportunity.
What opportunity?
Well, there is a particular ship that's a bit short on manpower.
That ship isn't even going to be going anywhere for a while.
And there are a few ears in that might be suitably bent by news of goings on.
Then I suppose we must make haste to London. Only to discover perhaps that they're not there either.
Perhaps they'll have beat us to Edinburgh by then.
That would be a trick, considering they don't know we're going there.
They didn't know I wanted to go to London either, but here we are.
I'm glad you can see humor in this.
It's all on how you look at it, Cormac. We can choose to be upset by the situation, or we can simply accept facts as they are and move forward.
We have no choice. So how are we going to get to London then? Rent a carriage?
We could go by carriage. We could charter another boat if you'd rather.
Boats are quicker.
That's true, but carriage would allow us to divert to Bath.
Without Eleanor, she would not approve.
I rather don't approve of her breaking plans, so...
No, I will wait for Eleanor to go to Bath. We've worked too hard.
As you say.
I suppose let's find ourselves another boat then.
Well, we will need to go to London at this rate anyway. I'm getting a bit light on coin at this rate, paying for all this sea voyage.
I'm running a bit low on coin myself.
And we need to do something about your clothes.
About what?
Your
My clothes?
attires. It's looking a bit worse for wear.
I could take a page from you and buy a wig. Perhaps a nice dress.
I don't think you'd fill it out.
If there's going to be clothing purchased, perhaps you'll have to make me a loan.
I can't very well have you going about looking like a pauper rather than a noble.
Does it really look that bad? He'll turn over the threadbare elbows and knees, the worn and filthy cape. I suppose it's worse than I thought.
It's why I favor leather. It looks better with wear.
I'll take your advice and try leather then. So long as it's black.
I suppose it will just depend on what the merchants have available. Be that as it may, let's see about that vessel.
Aye.
You find when you investigate the ports, or rather when you return to Liverpool to investigate the ports, it'll be a couple nights. Go ahead.
Why are we going all the way back to Liverpool when we're in Bristol?
Because the silting... Oh wait, Bristol. I'm thinking of Chester. Never mind. Ignore that. You're in Bristol. You're not in Chester. When you go to the ports in Bristol, you do find it's going to be a couple of nights before anyone is expecting to charter ferries around. But you will have quite enough for passage when it does come. You're not trying to bribe anybody to do it right now. And the voyage will take... expecting probably 3 or 4 days, depending on weather. So all said and done, within a week you'll be in London. And that'll put you well into mid-March. So now we will be playing some time catch-up. And Elenid and Robert mean to meet with the prince. I would like to do a scene there, but more than that, I would like us to catch up on the same timeline so we don't spend too long on the same two characters. So we will mostly go over this in out-of-character terms. What are Elenid and Robert's requests of the prince when they do get their meeting?
Robert's mainly interested in seeing what Elenid has in mind.
Elenid intends to inform them of how their progress went with speaking with both Ragna and with Barbaros, and the findings thereof.
So you relayed to Prince Ambrose that you were making some progress on getting Ragna to parley, but Barbaros seemed unrelenting And
More importantly, Barbaros seems to be at least partially controlled by that Tremere assistant he had.
that is a serious accusation to make of a Covenant Prince. I'll be having you make a... go with Charisma Expression, difficulty 8. To claim a Covenant Prince could be so easily manipulated. Especially right now, when things are so dire.
Oh no.
That is a botch. Maybe it's a good thing we didn't do a scene. Ambrose loses his temper when you make this accusation without ample evidence, and he's on the verge of frenzy before he shouts you out of his court. That is all you get to say to Ambrose. And Robert, I don't know if you want to stay in court with a near frenzy prince, or if you follow Elenid out. But this took a sharp turn quickly.
Near frenzy? No, he'll leave.
You will not be getting any more audiences with Ambrose for at least the foreseeable future. Elenid.
Very well.
So we will be doing kind of an overview of what the next couple weeks have in store for you, as you still have some time to catch up on. You've delivered your message to Bristol, hopefully. It's been received by Cormac and Thomas by now. So you have a couple weeks of downtime in London is what this boils down to. What does Robert do?
Try to rally what forces he can. Of course, money is the issue at this point.
I need more specifics on that. Who are you rallying? What are you rallying them for? And what are you telling them you're rallying them for?
He'll seek fighting men to replace the ones that were lost, and he'll charmingly give them promises of the pay that the other soldiers had.
Okay, so you're hiring some mercenaries, not like an army, but like 5 guards to replace the ones you lost.
Yeah.
Okay. And any mercenary will do.
I was gonna try to look for competent ones, but that's not the main priority for him.
I'm gonna say you don't have the experience in commanding military men to know what that looks like. Unless you maybe involve Elenid in this.
None of the talks with what's his name? Give me a sec. Jesper. That was not useful for this.
not in the way that you need. Jesper talked to you about, more broadly, his experiences in combat and at war, but he didn't really give you a breakdown of how to recruit mercenaries. So when you go into a bar or a tavern or an inn looking for fighting men, big burly drunkards look just as capable as the slim, long-nosed men, and it all kind of blurs together. You're not really sure which of these men is just large and which of them may be trained. You don't really know what muscles to look for, what equipment, how people sit, how they carry themselves, how they're armed, what kind of coin they're spending. All that to say is you're not experienced enough in this to really know, but it's not very complicated. If you're not worried too much about quality, you can get 5 men to replace the ones you lost. Now, as for promising them coin, I'll have you make a manipulation expression roll, difficulty 7. No successes. You're not having a whole lot of luck in promising these men a future coin, which is understandable given how cold and undesirable it would be to leave the safety and warmth of the taverns and inns to go out on the road to perhaps get coin following you. So you don't have any success in picking up mercenaries in London.
Alright.
What else is Elenid doing in this, we'll say, 2 weeks?
Alright. After that debacle... Well, the debacle of her trying to tell him her plans for which of them is the weaker link, she will go to that little fortress Thomas has acquired and see about readying the troops there. Making sure their skills are properly honed.
The castle which Thomas purchased?
Yes.
Okay.
Where his troops are, yeah. Well, his troops that did not die of consumption, I should say.
Well, there's not much of a castle right now, so his men are basically garrisoned at his manor.
Alright, then she will just be where those men are, and will be helping them train. Training a bit herself as well.
Alright. I'll take an... You're trying to kind of aid them
Make
in
them
their...
into more capable soldiers.
Okay. Make a charisma leadership roll. Difficulty 6. If my count's right, he has 20 men-at-arms still and 20 footmen there. Okay, so you cue Milan music, and you get 1 success on training these men up. You find the men-at-arms are actually fairly well trained. You don't make many improvements on them, but the footmen definitely benefit some. Not greatly, you're only there for a couple weeks after all, but some of them have never really fought as a group, as a cohesive unit before, and giving them the basic idea of how to do that does seem to resonate. And they at least have an idea of what to do if they had to be in a pitched battle together.
Because of the time skip, can we spend experience?
Sure. What do you want to spend it on?
Because of her trying to lead the men and organize them into a more fighting shape, I was going to toss it into leadership, and with the specialty, newfound specialty of military. If that is entirely alright with you.
Yes. You may buy the next point in leadership. I think that's very appropriate. Is there anything else either of the two of you wish to squeeze into these couple weeks? Don't worry about blood. You can maintain status quo. Okay, I'll take that as a no.
Perhaps going to court a few times, but just to get a general gauge for things.
Okay, K-Knight Court or...
Yes,
Kind?
K-Knight. She has no business being in Mortal Court.
Let me just look over... Let's see. Actually, I'm going to have you both make a perception alertness roll difficulty 8. It's more in reflection on something that already has happened as opposed to what is happening. Two successes from Robert.
Does detail-oriented apply?
No, I'm going to say not in this case.
What's the difficulty again?
8. Still, 2 successes. So both of you. When you were leaving Canterbury, you notice more than once the same rider seemed to be matching your trail.
Matching our trail?
Following you.
Huh, okay. Have we noticed this rider in London?
You think, with 2 successes, I'll say you think you may have seen the same man, but it's difficult to say, as you only saw him at a distance. Perhaps the paranoia is picking up, but you can't help shake the feeling that you are being followed, or at least watched, by someone. So I'll let you stew on that for a second. As far as going to court to London, the Camarilla diplomat Cesar de Leon remains at his station there. He seems to occasionally get reports of events abroad on the continent, of this war between these anarchs and this attempt at formation of some kind of organization known as the Camarilla. Ludovico Giovanni is occasionally spotted there as well, and despite your rejection of his offers, he continues to be friendly and polite. Let's see here. Bella Matea remains a fixture in Elysium. She spends as often as not there as at her own manor, holding private galas of her own kind. You do see the jester Tom Lefoy a couple times. The Sheriff Cash makes frequent visits. Ambrose is not seen. And an older looking Canaanite whom you've come to learn is known as Mordecai Benjamin. He frequents there on occasion and doesn't ever seem to take much interest in you, but he seems to have a few people meet him here and there. Is there anything in particular you want to learn from Elysium besides who was there?
She was actually hoping that the Camarilla the Camarilla diplomat was there to see if the two anarch groups are one and the same.
He says that it's difficult to say, although very possible, that this insurgency, this band, seems to have spread all across the continent.
Then she will spend that time trying to learn their tactics.
Okay. He is less informed on their tactics, as he's more of a diplomat than a tactician or a military leader, but he does kind of discuss and explain to you some of the most heinous of their attacks and the acts which they have committed upon some of the eldest in some of the cities in continental Europe. So you learn of some of the events going on abroad related to these anarchs and what they're capable of. And I will say that spends up your 2 weeks. And so we will get into around mid-March when Thomas and Cormac finally arrive. So we will open up a scene in Thomas's manor. Elenid and Robert, you're in the study when you're notified that Thomas and Cormac have arrived, returned to London. The door opens and Thomas and Cormac step in. The Gauntlet reunited again. The scene is yours.
Elnett has a serious expression while she's looking at them. No, not even attempting that polite smile.
How have travels been?
longer than expected.
I apologize for that. Believe me, there was a reason for it. First and foremost, remember how you were speaking of... Never mind, we'll talk about that part later. So, good news is we found his ghoul. Bad news, he was interrogated by the Inquisition and they know what we look like.
Yes. Hunters
And
now
someone
know.
seems to have been following us.
And that too.
Well, you have been busy.
More bad news. When we went to Canterbury, the prince saw fit, upon us arriving, to peer into our minds using one of her abilities.
And what did she find there exactly?
She was... yes, well, she is aware of, potential leanings within our little group.
Such as?
Eh?
Come now, Robert. Even you yourself stated that she was interested in, well, where we stand. And I know she did much the same thing to you. She was specifically questioning and gaining information on who was suspected of potentially siding with the anarchs. At least as far as my questioning is concerned. I am not certain what she questioned Robert on, but according to the vague information I got, I assume it's much the same thing.
Much more general. Treason in general, I suppose, but she did not gain anything useful of that nature from me.
The question's on the table, though. Where do you stand, Robert?
The anarchs? Are they even a real force yet?
It wasn't.
And I also... my apologies.
No, that was not the question. Where do I stand? Well, I currently stand with the Covenant.
Speaking of the Covenant, currently, lovely prince of the city refuses to see me because I tried to tell him the findings of our little diplomatic mission and how Barbaros is more or less, at least in the very partially sense, being manipulated by that assistant of his. He did not take kindly to that.
No, that doesn't seem like something that would go over very well at all.
I'm not even entirely sure of that myself, but Well, you took a bold stance.
I took a stance based on what I have observed. And which of the two is by far the weaker link?
For someone who... Go ahead.
Your forces, by the way, are 5 men down. The Inquisition happened to take them. Not take them as in for interrogation, but take them as in their lives are no more.
Tom looks vaguely nonplussed by this.
It's unfortunate that a sickness weakened them. Perhaps they would have been able to survive.
There's a reason I sent them with you.
Yes. I'm terribly sorry for the loss of your men.
It does seem curious for someone siding with the Covenant to also be participating in conspiracies with the child of a Covenant prince.
What do you speak of?
You don't think I'm blind, do you? We had this conversation in York. I know that you're up to something. What specifically, I'm not sure, but Dorothy's ambitions are quite evident. And you have a poker face to match that of a small child.
I suppose it's no secret she does not think well of her sire. But I don't know how you extract some sort of plan out of that.
I didn't extract a plan, merely that I am aware that you were conspiring with her. Again, to what ends, I couldn't say, but there are ends there. She seeks power. Of course she does. She's Ventrue.
Well, it seems out of the feud between the two, Barbaros is seen as the weaker link, at least by Elenid.
Oh, and something I forgot to mention. You remember that Mercer official that went missing that we discussed some odd months back? Apparently the Inquisition got a hold of him as well. That is why he went missing. They were trying to recruit someone who was under their protection.
Interesting.
The very same reason Robert School ended up getting captured. He was trying to get information on an individual that was under the protection of the Inquisition. This McNally fellow.
Now, why would the Inquisition wish to purloin a Mercer official?
More importantly, why is a velvet merchant important to the Inquisition outside of funding?
Didn't he burn down his own warehouse?
Yes. My point here is shortly after the Mercer official ended up getting captured, that one aflame, shortly after the last Gauntlet ended up looking into this McNally fellow, their place went aflame.
And their place was set aflame by Canaanites after they had looked deeply into the Mercers.
Yes. Point
Immediately
being,
after.
the Mercers, well, the Inquisition has reason to believe there's Canaanites behind it if they're going into capturing such people.
That was rather where I was going, actually, yes.
Which, to be fair, is something that we have been suspecting for a while. So, she'll clap her hands together. We have a bit of an issue here. In order to leave, we are going to need to assume new guises, so to speak, in order to throw off this tracker they have following. Or at least I assume it's the Inquisition that sent them after us. This individual has been following us since Canterbury.
They are of the Inquisition. Perhaps we should hang around the Mercer Company.
Do you know if Gertrude or Guy saw them as well?
I can certainly ask her.
I have not asked, but I would be surprised if Guy in his sickened state was aware of much.
Yes, he was still recovering from his wounds from the interrogation.
My point being, if he's only been seen at night, he may not necessarily be an agent of the Inquisition, but of Octavia.
I'm not certain if that is much better.
It would mean at least we don't have to worry about the manor being set aflame with us in sight.
At least I can say that is the preferable of outcomes.
And since discussion of treason has currently been on the table, minor or otherwise, and he'll look at Elenid, where do you stand regarding the anarchs?
The ones here or the ones in the continent, but I have talked to the Camarilla official and they seem like they could be one and the same.
Both. One and then the other.
I cannot say how I stand for an organization I do not know the motives of. Sure, they claim freedom from the little I've heard, but I have also heard counter to that from the official in town.
You've heard contrary information from a man whose parent organization is currently in open conflict with them. consider the source.
I also consider that the information regarding them claiming freedom comes from you, and that information came directly from them. Both sources are incredibly, if I may be so bold. I'm not speaking of you, of course. I am speaking of the people of which you spoke, since they are members of said organization.
I won't deny there are questions of longevity and how long they will uphold the ideals they espouse. We are still Canaanites, after all, given to a certain predilection. But the chance that abolishing hierarchies like the one currently forming in Lincoln, can't say I don't see the appeal.
Was it really wise to weaken the Covenant?
The Covenant weakens itself.
That was going to be my words exactly.
Robert, you were there. You saw how Ambrose reacted. True, my way of phrasing it could be better. I was never the most social person around. However, the point being that he did not want to hear of the potential issues with other princes. Their weaknesses. As such, it would be seen as a weakness on this organization as a whole.
Ignoring that fact won't make it go away. There is weakness.
Certainly there is always things to be improved on.
Sometimes it takes clearing the board and resetting the pieces.
That is the drastic step. Do not forget these are old and powerful Canaanites.
Yes, old, full of hubris and ancient power, believing one another infallible, incapable of being manipulated by those beneath them. Sounds Ambrose took particular exception because it was suggested that the contrary was true.
And the anarchs, they would be able to withstand any other invasion. We still don't know who is behind the Mercer Company. Of course, there are courts abroad as well.
I would suspect an elder Canaanite attempting to force aside the Covenant and reap the fertile ground of England herself. And a fractured covenant cannot defend against that at all. In fact, it's been allowing it for a century or more now.
Well, leader's only as good as the ones they send out.
Doesn't sound as if they've sent anyone out. It sounds as though the Gauntlet that preceded us was the first ones to even think to investigate them if wrong.
And look what became of them.
Yes, and things were manipulated to paint the anarchs as the cause.
Precisely. To which revealing their presence in Dorchester led to them being unjustly persecuted, hunted, much to the disappointment of John Mark's forces. I do wonder how the Anarch forces knew they were there.
Robert just smiles at this.
Tell me again where you stand on the matter of the Anarchs.
Self-preservation.
I wonder if Ambrose would see it the same way.
Perhaps not.
I wonder if Jean-Marc would have seen it the same way. How many men did he lose? For your self-preservation.
They were sent there to combat with the anarchs. It is unfortunate that they lost the fight, but simply letting them know when they were in a completely different area at least made that fight possible.
In for a pence, in for a pound, Robert.
Though you seem quite pushy. What new has happened with the anarchs?
Well, given that at least 3 of us have been complicit in aiding the Anarchs in one way or another, it seems we may as well simply come to a consensus on the matter.
Cormac doesn't say anything right now. He just starts pacing, waiting to see what Ellen and Robert have to say. Wondering if Thomas is being a little too forward.
As I have stated before, to make a judgment based on what little information I have on them would be incredibly foolish.
Then why not make a judgment based on what abundant information you have on the Covenant?
certainly the Covenant is still stronger than the Anarchs.
For how long?
That is the thing, Robert. We know next to nothing about them. We know that they are enough of a threat that the princes, at least some of them, consider them a bigger threat than the little squabble between Ragnar and Barbaros.
And of course, unity must be the first goal of the Covenant.
We were told by any means possible.
Up to and including the slaughter of a sitting Covenant prince and all of his or her forces.
Definitely doesn't sound like unity to me.
Which I definitely intended to do, and I tried to explain the weakest link to, again, Prince Ambrose, and he would not hear it.
Unity.
Well, at least the removal of any dissenting elements.
That, and we wasted precious time. We had 2 weeks here. We could have spent those 2 weeks coming up with a plan in order to dispose of the more inept prince, working with Ambrose to do so.
And
But
you
he
are
will not hear
convinced Barbaros is the inept prince simply because of his advisor.
Do you not see how he follows his advisor around and hangs on his every word?
Not to some great extent.
Actually,
Is there
to-
anything else?
Cormac and I mean to set sail for Edinburgh to negotiate with Prince Malcolm for allies.
I do mean strongly, suggest that while leaving the city, the two of you need to find some new guise or some sort of... or just sneaking around, something to try to hide yourself from whoever is following.
I think it may also be time to retire the old manor.
You think it is too much of a target now?
Had Guy stayed here prior to being captured by the Inquisition, he will have revealed its location and its resident.
That would be the safe option.
after finding some way to disguise myself, I have every intention on making my way to York and seeing how the situation has progressed.
I would encourage you to join us in Edinburgh.
To seek allies to overtake the Covenant.
Is that what I said? Were we not told by the Covenant Council to seek allies in Scotland and Ireland?
Yes, but I wonder if these allies will take advantage of the situation.
And what if they do?
Would you be fine with the Covenant being replaced in such a fashion?
We can either have Ragna continue her machinations to overtake all of England and supplant the Covenant in place of a monarch, or, given that you are currently conspiring to prevent that from happening, perhaps you would like to expand your existing treason to include taking steps that might actually work.
This does force a choice.
It does, in fact. By my count, myself, Cormac, and you, Robert, are all currently guilty of treason in one form or another.
Still, even what if what I've done could be seen as treasonous, I don't feel that event is enough to hang over my head.
I'd rather have you with us, Robert. And he lays a hand on the sword.
There's no need for that, Thomas. We must remind Robert that the Covenant is an experiment. One that is clearly failing.
My own sire has even pointed it out. She said, "Let it burn." Don't you recall?
Sure, but I don't think she had in mind replacing with anarchs.
I think she had in mind replacing it with anything else.
Interesting that you would at least take a stance that would result in violence.
Violence is coming, Robert. It's not a matter of what stance I take.
Would it be enough if I just promise not to mention anarch involvement?
I don't know that that's necessarily a promise you'd willingly keep.
As long as we remain on good terms.
Were we on such bad terms when you told Jean-Marc about it?
I admit I was a bit annoyed, but... well... I did completely leave Cormac out.
For which I'm grateful.
Well, it's quite up to you what action you will take, but I'll at least see how things play out before making a final decision. I fully intend to head to York.
Don't expect the same warm welcome. Ragnar's quite annoyed with us.
Oh, believe me, I'm about to annoy the rest of the Covenant princes. I go there under the pretenses of by any means necessary.
Do you mean to convince Ragnar to rally the Covenant forces?
I intend to say that should the Covenant forces be rallied, then I will command them in a way that is beneficial for eliminating Barbara. You two can make of that what you will.
Then if you two will not be swayed to go to Edinburgh, I think that we still intend to. I think the rest of the British Isles have had quite enough of this Covenant experiment.
Aye. The only people I see who still argue in its favor are those who are either in positions of power within it, or wish to be.
I suppose you don't see us... everyone at least having the potential to gain power.
That depends. Do you mean to kill a prince?
Well...
Because short of that little spot of treason, no.
this is your motivation. What has the Covenant brought? I know they are currently unstable, but...
Look around you, Robert. You grew up in a house like this just like I did.
And?
How many others do you think within the Covenant can say the same?
What does this have to do with anything?
It has to do with what it means to be a lesser, someone beneath notice. How many of those do you think there are within the Covenant, chafing at that very note?
I suppose the ones not willing or able to better themselves will always feel downtrodden.
And those that are willing and able, in Lincoln, for example, what might they do if someone who simply had more time is unwilling to share domain, herd, resources?
I've known my grandsire to be very generous, but...
He's dead now.
Yes, you speak of the new prince.
She's taken Lincoln by the balls and shaken it for all it's worth. No one can so much as shit without her asking a pence for it.
You have an update on the current events.
I spoke with those currently paying the pence.
Ah.
You spoke with what? 3 elders. Cormac and I spoke with 20 or more. Let the elders milk for all they're worth, just so that they can scrabble in the dirt for whatever scraps those same elders cast aside.
Or for protection.
How much is that worth?
How much is security? A place to feed without mortals hunting you.
Well, they currently have no way to access domain, no herd of their own, and they have to pay for the privilege in the form of boons, so they don't have that, do they?
Boons are a form of protection in themselves.
Payment's payment.
As long as it is willingly given, what is the issue?
If the option is to starve or pay, what would you choose?
Clearly to pay, because I value sustenance.
That's no choice, Robert. Starve and die, or pay so that you can pay again the next night, and the next, and the next, and into perpetuity.
You make it sound as if we have short lives.
Perpetuity, for all time, eternity. How long before a minor boon becomes a major boon, becomes a life boon? And now your unlife is no longer even your own, simply because you wished to survive.
That is the reality the neonates deal with nightly.
And that is what the Covenant props up.
just don't quite see where the main contention is.
Are you daft, man?
Men spend their whole lives as vassals.
But we are not men.
Those vassals eventually have the peace of release. Are you suggesting the only option for a neonate who doesn't like the fact that someone else controls and owns his unlife is to walk into the sun? Freely given my hairy arse.
Since you put it as death being the release, either that or grow old and take power for yourself.
While the elders continue to grow old as well and hold on to and accumulate that same power. You don't see the cycle. Do you think you'll be older than Ragna ever?
With how things are going, perhaps. Perhaps not.
Then you're a fool.
But the cycle itself it's what refreshes things.
No. In order to refresh, something needs to die.
Then I've missed what cycle you speak of then.
The cycle of the elders. Collecting more and more power to themselves, while those beneath them labor under that same yoke, simply acting in order to preserve their own skin forever, serving those same elders who hold them to debts they never wanted, simply because they had to feed and survive. Survival's not living, Robert.
No, but they are given a structure. Structure of which to advance. One does not stay a neonate forever.
No, one has to kill one's own and rise above those beneath them, and eventually perpetrate the same crimes against the younger that the elder had perpetrated against them originally.
And while that is quite grim, that is the way.
The way that the Covenant has built.
It doesn't have to be that way.
How different would the anarchs be?
Different enough to be owed a chance.
Their main claim, what, everyone is equal.
Yes.
Do you not think the stronger would still rise up from that to take power?
I think there has not been a situation in human history where hierarchies have not developed. But a new hierarchy could be formed. One that does not simply favor the eldest.
In favor of what, then?
The most deft. Those most capable. Simply being old doesn't mean that you happen to be good at everything.
Good at everything, no, but making it that long is certainly as a testament to one's abilities.
To hide. To go to ground. To weather storms. I can go into a cave tomorrow, never reemerge, and get old.
Fair enough, but that of course would require completely removing yourself from Cainite politics.
You're missing my point. Simply getting old doesn't necessarily endear one to one's fellows, and it certainly doesn't necessarily improve one's ability to lead.
You are correct in that, but these elders are not ones that have simply hidden in a cave. They play an active role in our own lives every night.
You're right on that account.
Still, I would be at least interested to see if this plays out well. An anarch revolt, but to simply throw all my dice in with them, that I am still contending.
You've no powerful allies left, Robert.
He's right. All you have left is the status given to you by the opportunity of joining the Gauntlet. If that was taken away, you'd be on the same ground with those neonates. Perhaps you'd see what we were talking about.
I'm sure that is assuming things only progress as they at a constant, without change. After all, there are always potentials for new allies.
New allies is what we're considering.
Quite.
Ones who refuse to wear a yoke.
And similarly refuse to place a yoke upon others.
That is what is said. I do not know if that would become reality.
It's currently the reality that a yoke is placed upon all of us.
Quite.
Our freedom comes at the will of a few.
so long as we don't displease them.
And even that's been tested, as Ellen can attest. How did you say your conversation with Ambrose went again?
That he nearly frenzied and demanded I leave, and he refuses to see me again.
Well, don't think I'm looking down on you joining the Anarchs, after all. I see this as perhaps an attempt to gain more power for yourselves as well.
You'd be wrong. Not everyone is out to grab power for its own sake.
Perhaps not for its own sake, but this would be the end result.
How so?
It would even the playing field.
Aye, it might. But it might not. But you ought to know well enough by now. I'm not interested in power.
All right, boys, you've been talking in circles for far too long.
On that, I agree. One cannot continue an argument with a brick wall.
Let's go see about finding those new clothes. Perhaps we'll bump into their tracker while we're out. Happen to have a description you could give?
Element will provide the one that she's noticed. Is there anything outside of an individual on a horse, or is it just so dark out that all they got is an individual on a horse?
No, you got enough details that you could identify it was the same rider multiple times, perhaps even here in London at some point. And Cormac, as you're hearing this description, you can make an intelligence alertness roll, difficulty 8.
Botch!
At first you think this sounds familiar, but then you think otherwise.
Robert, since the conversation is over, you should likely go and pack your thing.
Yes.
Alright, so Robert departs to go pack his things. What is Elena do?
After the door is closed, she speaks in a more hushed tone with the two of them. I intend to have Barbaros ended. Make use of what openings you can.
There are plans already in motion we have no control over. Suffice to say, the distraction will be well used.
Very well. Needless to say, Octavia suspects you, Thomas, due to her prying in the mind. And I am uncertain how much of a suspicion she has for Cormac, but I know there is one there. I am uncertain how well you can keep up this route.
Not forever, but we knew that already.
Yes, but it may be shorter than you initially anticipated.
Thank you for the warning. We will use it.
If she suspects and has taken no action, perhaps she sees the wisdom in a purge of sorts.
In any case, I don't want to see you on the other side of a battlefield. Consider our words. Something must change.
Do you think I leave openings in my plan often?
Tom chuckles. No, of course not.
No, once I get enough information, I will make a judgment and weigh my options. Should I not get ample information, then I have little reason to blindly trust unless things go horribly south.
That at least is wisdom and not blind obedience such as Robert shows.
As Thomas knows, I have already stated interest in siding with them should self-preservation have to show up back when we were on back when all three of us were on the chopping block of his grandsire.
I am hoping he'll learn to see reason. But if he doesn't... Cormac shrugs.
My intentions are to play the role of the tactician. I will do what I can for you there, but...
Eventually, you'll both have to choose a side.
I understand, but any well-read person typically does not choose without information.
I never was much for book reading. Sometimes choices have to be made from the gut.
My own choice was made from an intellectual perspective. I am, after all, quite versed in philosophy and law.
You
What we
aren't
are
the only
experiencing.
one who has dabbled in law. Granted, I don't have any fancy title to come from.
The days of knights and fiefs are coming to an end. In
As he
any
said.
case, Cormac will nod to you.
The noble class is scarcely able to support its own weight. It will collapse.
Though, they do try to talk to you in terms of tactical awareness. Canterbury has its own natural defenses. And I mean that in the faith sort, not just the Templars. It's an aura that seems to engulf the entire city. Defensible, but dangerous.
Cormac nods. Our thanks again. Should we be away, Thomas?
Yes, let's see about getting you suited up in a more appropriate attire.
Who knows? Maybe he can be the lady this time.
Cormac actually laughs at that since he himself suggested that.
I already told him he'd never fill out the dress. He's not the tits for it.
It can be sewn in such a way to have a bit extra padding there to make up for it.
I, for one, think my bosoms would be extraordinary.
Elned laughs a bit at this. Well then, I should ready myself for the trip to York.
I think I'll have Kasim make arrangements to relocate the household.
Very well. Oh, and your foot soldiers, by the way, the more untrained ones. They're a bit better, but not by much.
That, I think Tom will lead the way out to go find the Leatherman.
Okay. So with that, Cormac and Thomas depart, and the scene will fade on them leaving, and we will close the session at the end of this tense decision for the Gauntlet, and pick it up next week. Good game. That slow burning high drama of
Which I had to run away in the middle of and came back and look, there's no progress.
I'm not one to interrupt a meeting, but I thought it was funny that Elena did. Cool. Alright. We will do one experience all around. Do some entertaining role players. Start with Sarah.
You know what? I'm gonna give it to Robert for being that wall all through that argument. It was pretty much the same counter argument.
He's firm in his beliefs. Robert, how about you?
Gonna give it to Elena tonight.
Cool. Thomas.
I think I'm also going to give it to Elenid. She was at least trying to facilitate something.
Yeah, you just need to give her ample information and she will make a decision.
Cool. And Cormac.
I'm going to give it to Robert for being so damned hard-headed.
Love it. Great. Obviously, I don't, encourage PvP at all, but I think this has taken a very natural and organic path for the PCs, go in the directions they're going, and I definitely appreciate the maturity everyone's handling with it. I think everyone's doing a great job in that regard, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how everything plays out going forward. So that's my take on that, and we'll pick it up again next week.
Sweet.
All right, have a good night.
Good night.
Yeah.
Do we get XPs though?
Yes,
One.
1 XP all around.